I still remember that evening, the sunset painting the sky with colors that looked too peaceful for the chaos inside me. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. My wedding was just 3 weeks away. The woman I loved more than anything, Alyssa, was about to become my wife. We'd been planning everything together, from the venue to the little details like the flowers on each table. I was in love, deeply, stupidly, completely. That day, I was driving home from work early, carrying a surprise, 2 tickets to her favorite place in the mountains, a short getaway before the wedding. I wanted to show her how grateful I was, for loving me, for choosing me. I had no idea that she had already chosen someone else. When I entered her house, the lights were dim, but I could hear faint music. My heart smiled. Maybe she'd planned a surprise for me too. I walked quietly toward the living room, holding the tickets behind my back like a secret gift. But before I could step in, I heard a voice, deep, familiar, and impossible to mistake. My father's voice. He was saying something soft, almost affectionate. Then I heard Alyssa giggle. The sound froze me in place. My hand trembled. I took one more step, enough to see through the narrow opening of the door. And there they were, my father and my fiancée. To close, his hand resting on hers. Her eyes, the same eyes that once sparkled for me, locked on his. For a moment, I forgot to breathe. My heart didn't just break, it shattered piece by piece. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. It felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. I stepped back, my chest tight, my mind spinning. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. But then I heard her say the sentence that ended everything. I can't pretend anymore. I love you, not him. Those words burned into my soul. And my father, my own father, the man I trusted the most, replied softly, "Then don't. He doesn't need to know. We'll handle it our way." I dropped the tickets right there. They fluttered to the floor like the last remains of my hope. I turned and walked away quietly, afraid that if I made a sound, I'd explode. That night, I drove without direction. The city lights blurred into streaks. I ended up at an empty park, the one Alyssa and I used to visit. I sat on the bench where we first kissed and stared at my trembling hands. I had no tears left, just a heavy silence that felt louder than thunder. I didn't know what hurt more, her betrayal or his. How could my father, the man who raised me, guided me, protected me, do this? And why would she? Why would she destroy everything we built? I wanted answers. But deep down, I already knew the truth. Greed, power, pride. My father had always been a man who got what he wanted in business, in life. Maybe he saw Alyssa as just another thing to win. That night, I made a silent promise. Not for revenge, not yet, but for truth. I needed to know why they did it, and I needed them to feel the pain they'd left me with. As I looked up at the sky, a thought crossed my mind. Sometimes betrayal doesn't destroy you instantly. It shapes the fire inside you. And I knew, from that night forward, I'd never be the same man again. The next morning felt unreal. The sun rose like it always did, birds sang, people smiled on their way to work, but for me, everything looked fake. Every color, every sound, every face. Because I had seen the ugliest truth hiding behind the prettiest smiles. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. I spent hours sitting in my car, replaying the scene in my head. Her laughter, his voice, my father's voice. It echoed inside me like a cruel song I couldn't turn off. By the time I reached my apartment, my phone was full of missed calls from Alyssa, from my father, even from my mother. They were probably wondering where I was. I stared at my phone, feeling the anger rise again. But I didn't answer. Not yet. I wanted to see how far they'd go, pretending. Later that day, I walked into the office. My father owned the company, a construction empire that he'd built from nothing. I had worked there since I was 21, trying to prove I was worthy of running it one day. But that morning, I wasn't a son or an employee. I was an actor, pretending I didn't know. When I entered his office, he looked up from his desk with his usual commanding presence, calm, confident, untouchable. "Son," he said, smiling, "you disappeared last night. Everything okay?" I nodded slowly. Just needed a drive. Pre-wedding nerves, I guess. He chuckled. "That's normal. You're marrying a wonderful girl. You're lucky." The word stabbed me, but I didn't let it show. I smiled, the kind of smile that hides a storm behind it. "Yeah," I said softly, "I really am." He had no idea that I had seen everything, and somehow, that gave me power. Because now, I wasn't the blind son. I was the observer, silent, but dangerous. At lunch, I met Alyssa. She looked radiant, almost glowing. When she saw me, she ran up and hugged me tightly. "Oh my God, where were you?" I was so worried. I hugged her back stiffly, pretending everything was fine. "Just had a rough day," I said. "Work stress." Her eyes searched mine, but she couldn't read me. She never could. "I missed you," she whispered. I wanted to ask, "Did you miss me last night too, when you were with him?" But I bit my tongue and smiled. I missed you too. The entire lunch felt like a movie, one where I already knew the ending. She kept talking about wedding decorations, color themes, her dress, and all I could think of was how icily lies came out of her mouth. After she left, I sat there staring at my coffee. She was so convincing, so calm. It made me realize this wasn't a sudden mistake. They'd been planning it, maybe for weeks, maybe months. That night, I went through old photos and messages. I noticed things I hadn't before, subtle patterns. Texts that went unanswered because she was busy. Calls from my father at odd hours. And one photo that broke me, a picture of them at a family dinner. Sitting close, smiling in a way that now felt too intimate to ignore. I started connecting the dots, and the picture that formed was uglier than I ever imagined. They weren't just in love, they were hiding it. Together, but then, something strange happened. I got a call from my mother. Her voice sounded distant, tired. "Son, your father hasn't been home much lately. Is everything okay at the office?" I hesitated. Should I tell her? No, not yet. Because now, I had two questions to answer. Why did they betray me? And how far were they willing to go? That night, I made a plan. Not for revenge yet, but for exposure. I wanted to know the truth from their own lips. And to do that, I needed to get closer. Pretend to trust again, because sometimes the best way to destroy a lie is to feed it until it chokes itself. I started recording things, conversations, messages, little moments that seemed harmless but held weight. Every smile, every secret glance, every half-truth, each one was a piece of evidence. But even as I gathered proof, I could feel the darkness growing inside me. I wasn't the same person anymore. Love had turned into suspicion. Hope had turned into strategy. And deep down, I started realizing something. It wasn't just about her or him anymore. It was about me. About the man I was becoming because of them. That night, I looked at my reflection in the mirror and whispered, "You destroyed my heart. But you created something stronger, my resolve." And for the first time since that day, I smiled. A calm, dangerous smile. Because I finally knew I wasn't the victim anymore. I was about to become the story they'd never forget. For the next few weeks, I lived two lives. To the world, I was the same man, calm, smiling, preparing for his wedding. But inside, I was someone else entirely. A ghost, wearing my old skin, watching, listening, planning. Every conversation became a game of lies and observation. Every word they said, every look, every pause became a clue. And I was patient. Because revenge, I learned, isn't something you rush. It's something you build, piece by piece, until it becomes art. I kept seeing Alyssa as usual. We'd go out, laugh, and talk about our future. She'd hold my hand, look into my eyes, and talk about love, and I'd nod, pretending to believe every word. But inside, I was memorizing her expressions, recording her voice, noticing the slight tremor when I mentioned my father's name. One evening, as we sat at her apartment planning the guest list, I mentioned casually, "Dad said he might invite some business partners. He really admires you, you know?" She smiled, that same smile I once thought was pure. "He's been so supportive. You're lucky to have a father like him." I stared at her, holding back the bitter laugh rising in my chest. Lucky. That word had never felt so twisted. A few days later, I had dinner at my parents' house. My mother cooked, my father poured wine. Everything looked normal, picture perfect. But when Alyssa arrived to join us, I saw it again. That flicker in their eyes when they looked at each other. Quick, subtle, but it was there. My mother didn't notice. She was too busy talking about the wedding. But I noticed everything. When dinner ended, I volunteered to clean up, telling them to relax in the living room. From the kitchen, I could hear faint whispers laughter, then silence when I walked in. The tension hung in the air like smoke. They were getting careless, and I was ready to use it. That night, I drove to an old friend's place, Noah, my college roommate. He worked in tech security now, smart, quiet, and loyal. I told him I needed help setting up some surveillance at my father's office. He raised an eyebrow. "That's serious. You sure about this?" I didn't blink. "I just need to know something. I'll explain later." Within a week, I had access to my father's office camera feed. I didn't expect to find much, just proof that he met her there sometimes. But what I found was worse. Alyssa had been visiting him often, not just short visits. Hours, sometimes during workdays. They sat close, whispered, even held hands. And once, I saw him give her something, a key. To what? I didn't know yet. When I confronted Alyssa about her schedule, she lied smoothly. "I've been finalizing wedding catering, baby. You know how much work it takes?" I smiled. "Of course. You're amazing." And I meant it. She was amazing at pretending. But I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. I wanted them to walk into their own trap willingly, confidently, thinking they had fooled me completely. So I played along. I even invited my father and Alyssa to a private pre-wedding dinner, just the three of us. A symbolic gesture, I said, to thank the two people who meant the most to me. They both agreed. I still remember that dinner. The tension was invisible but electric. I poured the wine, cracked jokes, talked about the honeymoon plans. They laughed like nothing was wrong, and I recorded everything. Halfway through, I asked my father, "So, Dad, you trust her completely, right?" He looked surprised. "Of course I do." Why? I leaned back. "Just curious. Sometimes people aren't who they seem." For a split second, Alyssa's smile faded. Just a flicker, but I saw it. After dinner, when I dropped her home, she said softly, "You've been distant lately. Is something wrong?" I looked at her for a long moment. "No," I said. "Everything's perfect." But in my mind, I was already designing the stage for their downfall. Not through violence or shouting, but through exposure, through truth, because the most painful revenge is not destroying someone's life. It's letting them destroy themselves while the world watches. That night, I created a folder on my computer. I named it The Wedding Files. Inside it, I saved the recordings, photos, messages, and camera clips. Every piece of truth, every drop of poison they had poured into my life, collected neatly, waiting to be served back. And as I stared at the folder, I whispered to myself, "You wanted a love story, Alyssa? You'll get one. But not the ending you dreamed of." The next phase was about to begin. The game was no longer about pretending, it was about control. And I had all the pieces. When you study a face long enough, you begin to understand the tiny habits that betray the truth, the way someone blinks before a lie, the half smile that isn't really a smile, the finger that taps when guilt is nearby. I used those small things like threads, pulling until the fabric of their secrecy unraveled. I started small. Little tests. Innocent questions with poisonous intent. A casual mention of a business meeting that fell through, a subtle hint about a mutual friend who'd seen them together. Each time, I watched their reactions, the micro-expressions, the quick rearrangement of posture, the way they avoided eye contact just a second too long. Then I let the first trap snap. It was a quiet Wednesday. I sent a group message to both of them, my father, Alyssa, my mother, and a few close family friends, suggesting a surprise announcement at my fiancée's bachelorette lunch. I framed it as a playful reveal about our last-minute honeymoon plan. The plan was simple. Get everyone in one place, make them comfortable, and then, with a single, precise move, shift attention to the thing they feared most. Exposure. At the lunch, people chatted, glasses clinked, photos were taken. The room smelled of flowers and lemon cake, an ordinary, happy scene. My father arrived late, hugging everyone, talking like the proud man he always played in public. Alyssa was radiant, laughing easily. My mother had no idea. She enjoyed the scene like any mother would. When the moment felt natural, I stood up and raised my glass. "Thank you all for coming," I said, voice steady. "Alyssa and I have some big news." I paused, eyes turned toward us. The air felt expectant. "We've decided to move the wedding up. It's happening this month. And there's a surprise guest we wanted to invite." I let those words hang there, watching my father's jaw tighten just slightly. I saw the micro change in his eyes, calculation firing for a split second. Then I did what I'd planned. We thought it might be good to include someone who's been helpful in the planning. I smiled, sweet and slow, and then added, "Dad, would you mind coming with us to check the venue next week? Just you and me, a father-son thing." Heads nodded. My father's face softened, the perfect public mask. He agreed immediately. "Of course," he said. "Anything for you?" Later that afternoon, when most people had left and the room had quieted, I sent Alyssa a link. It was an innocuous image from my phone, an old family photo, captioned, "Remember when we were all kids?" She responded with heart emojis and a line about nostalgia. I didn't respond. I was building pressure, invisible but constant. My next move was subtler. I started accidentally leaving little things around, a printed photo on the coffee table, a letter on the nightstand, the kind of items people don't notice until they're told to. I made sure that the things I left would be seen by the right eyes at the right time. I placed a printed image from the office camera near the stack of wedding invitations in the study. I tucked a recorded clip on a thumb drive into a folder labeled Financials and left it on my father's desk copy machine. I photographed receipts and messages and made sure a copy ended up in places that would be found casually. They were confident, too confident, and confidence is a dangerous blindfold. Then I pushed further. I arranged for a minor leak in the company newsletter, a fake announcement, private client meeting rescheduled. It was a small error, something the staff would laugh off, but the link I planted inside that leak led to a password-protected page. Behind it was a slideshow I'd prepared. Collages of images showing Alyssa and my father together, timestamps included. The idea was not to humiliate immediately, but to create curiosity. Let the rumors spread quietly before striking. And people noticed. The slideshow circulated, first in whispers, then in surprised glances. A couple of colleagues called me privately, asking if I knew anything. "Are they?" one asked, voice low. I feigned ignorance and played the wounded fiancé perfectly. Concerned, confused, heartbroken. Their complacency was cracking in private, but not yet in public. I needed it to fail louder. So I baited the second trap: money. My father's empire was built on relationships and appearances. Reputation was the most valuable currency he had. I knew of a partnership deal, a multi-million contract that would secure the company's future. It was to be announced at a gala dinner in 2 weeks. The investors expected stability, family unity. I couldn't let that stand untouched, not when the truth would explode soon enough. I didn't sabotage the contract directly. I did something quieter and more precise. I created an illusion of instability. I emailed a well-crafted note to a senior partner, an anonymous tip about internal family disputes affecting management. I leaked a doctored internal memo that hinted the CEO might be stepping down. I used the company's own paperwork to suggest that leadership was shaky. The ripple worked. Investors grew cautious. Questions started floating toward the board. In meetings, my father grew distracted, thin, and brittle. He barked at managers in tones he never used before. He stopped smiling. The public man he'd always been began to fracture. But the most beautiful part of the trap was how they reacted to each other. Under stress, secret lovers reveal more of themselves. Where once their glances were furtive and controlled, now they became sharp and defensive. Alyssa started messaging me less, not because she was with him, but because she feared being caught. My father, who had always been a conductor of calm, began micromanaging every small thing, as if trying to control a world that was slipping. One rainy evening, I left another breadcrumb, an envelope in my mother's kitchen containing a printout of a calendar entry, private to 10 p.m., office my mother, who was naturally curious, asked the question no one wanted to hear. "What is this?" I watched them struggle. My mother confronted my father gently, with the gentle fury of a woman who's seen too many broken promises. He lied. He apologized. He promised it was nothing. She accepted it because mothers want to believe, but the seed of doubt had been planted. I wasn't cruel. I was just relentless. The traps were never designed to destroy people physically or to shame them publicly beyond recognition. Instead, they were designed to make them confront the reality they tried so desperately to hide. I wanted to force them into choices, confess and face the consequences, or continue the lie and watch everything else collapse. As the weeks passed, pressure built. The rumor mill hummed. The investors whispered, and my mother grew quiet at home. Alyssa kept a smile for the public, but walked with a fatigue. I knew only too well a fatigue of someone carrying a secret too heavy to keep. On a stormy night, after yet another tense board meeting where my father snapped at a trusted director, I sat in the passenger seat while he drove home, unaware of what I'd seen earlier that day. He was silent. For the first time in my life, I felt pity wash over me like cold water. It wasn't soft. It was a sharp, honest pity for a man who'd thought he could control everything. But pity didn't mean mercy. I had one final move to set the stage for the public unraveling. A gathering where truth could not hide. It would be orchestrated with all the painful clarity of a surgeon's cut. Careful, precise, irreversible, I invited a select group of people to a private family dinner, not at our house, but at a small venue where the lights were warm and the guest list was short. My mother would attend, a few family friends, 2 key investors, and them the 2 who'd believed themselves untouchable. When the RSVPs came in, my father even called to personally thank me. His gratitude sounded sincere. It made me smile, because that night when we sat down and the candlelight trembled, when people toasted and memories were spoken, I would not be there to beg or plead. I would sit still and let the careful pattern of evidence I'd stitched together speak for itself. I wanted them to hear their own lies echoed back at them in the voices of people they respected. I wanted the room to become a mirror, forcing them to face what they had done, reflected by those who loved and trusted them most. The trap wasn't a punchline. It was a reckoning. And by the time dessert came, the air in that room was already changing. The first cracks were visible in lines around my father's mouth, a tremor in Alyssa's hands. My mother's gaze moved between them like a compass that had lost its north. I sat at the edge of the table, hands folded, watching. The hunter and the hunted roles had shifted long ago. Now, they would decide how loud the fall would be. The night of the dinner felt different. The air was heavy, like it knew what was coming. I could feel it pressing against my skin as I adjusted my tie in the mirror. Everything was ready. The guests had confirmed. The venue was perfectly arranged. Soft lighting, elegant table setup, calm background music. No one knew this wasn't just a dinner. It was an execution, not of people, but of lies. When I arrived, the restaurant's private hall shimmered in golden tones. My father stood near the entrance, charming as ever, shaking hands, laughing like he hadn't destroyed a family. Alyssa stood beside him, elegant, graceful, pretending. Her smile didn't reach her eyes tonight. Maybe she felt something. Guilt, perhaps, or maybe fear. My mother arrived shortly after, dressed in her usual simple grace, unaware of the truth waiting to break her heart. Seeing her made my chest ache. She was the only innocent one in this story. As everyone took their seats, I looked around the table. Investors, family friends, my parents, my fiancée, all smiling, all blind. And in the middle of that illusion, I sat quietly holding the remote to the hidden screen behind me. The dinner began normally. Laughter, toasts, polite conversation. My father dominated the room as usual. He spoke about business expansions, success stories, the importance of family loyalty. Family loyalty. The irony made me clench my jaw. When dessert arrived, I tapped my glass gently. Before we finish, I said, I want to show something special, a small video I made, a memory reel, for the people I love. Alyssa looked at me, her smile tight. My father froze for half a second, then nodded, confident. Of course, son, go ahead. The lights dimmed. The projector screen flickered to life. It started softly, old photos of me and Alyssa, our vacations, laughter, memories. Everyone smiled, relaxed. Then came the second part. My parents, our family gatherings, my father's proud speeches. I saw him lean back, comfortable. He didn't see what was coming next. The next clip began with a grainy office camera view. The angle was subtle, just enough to show 2 figures, my father, Alyssa. Leaning close, whispering, smiling. The room went silent. Alyssa gasped, her hand trembling. My father's face drained of color. The footage continued. Short clips, nothing indecent, just enough to tell the truth. Whispers filled the room. Someone muttered, "Is that?" Then came the last image, the one that broke the silence completely. A still frame of them holding hands in my father's office, time-stamped 2 weeks ago. I stood slowly, my voice calm but sharp as glass. "This," I said, "is what loyalty looks like when it dies." My mother turned to my father, her eyes wide, disbelieving. "Tell me this isn't real," she whispered. He opened his mouth. No words came. Alyssa was shaking, tears streaming down her face, whispering my name again and again like it could undo what had happened. "Please, I didn't mean," but I raised a hand. "No, don't. You meant every bit of it." The room was silent except for the faint hum of the projector. No one dared to move. Then my father finally spoke, voice cracked. "Son, let me explain." "Explain what?" I interrupted. "That you stole my future. That you betrayed your own blood. Or that you taught me the hardest lesson of all. Never trust the people who say they love you most." He tried to stand, but his legs wavered. Alyssa reached for him, but he stepped back, ashamed maybe for the first time in his life. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "How long?" she whispered. "How long has this been going on?" Neither of them answered, because silence was the answer. I looked at them, the man who gave me life, and the woman I almost gave my life to, and felt something unexpected. Peace. Not joy, not triumph, just peace. Because truth, once revealed, doesn't shout. It whispers, it breathes relief. I turned to the guests, voice steady. "I didn't show this to shame anyone," I said. "I showed it to end something. Lies destroy everything around them. But truth sets everyone free." Then I picked up my coat, nodded politely, and walked out. No shouting, no scene. Just the quiet satisfaction of a man who finally reclaimed his dignity. Outside, the rain had started falling, soft, cleansing. I stood there for a moment, letting the drops touch my face. Behind me, I could hear voices, muffled arguments, broken sobs. But I didn't turn back, because that night wasn't about them anymore. It was about me letting go. As I walked toward my car, I felt lighter, like I had buried something heavy deep inside the rain-soaked ground. Not love, not pain, just the past. But even as I drove away, a thought lingered. Betrayal doesn't end when truth is spoken. Sometimes it echoes in whispers, in guilt, in regret. And I knew this wasn't over yet. Because revenge may reveal the truth, but justice still needed to be served. When I awoke the next morning, the rain was still tapping softly against the window. The world outside looked calm, almost innocent, as if it had already forgotten the storm that ripped through that dinner. But for the people in that room, calm had become a stranger. My phone buzzed constantly. Missed calls, messages, news alerts. The video had found its way online. Not by me, someone at the dinner had recorded it. A guest, maybe one of the investors. It spread like wildfire through the city's business circles. CEO caught in scandal. Family betrayal inside company. The headlines were brutal. By noon, the empire my father had built began to crumble. At the office, silence replaced the usual hum of phones and chatter. Employees avoided eye contact. Whispers floated through corridors. His once trusted partners pulled away. Deals froze. Meetings were canceled. Reputation, the thing he prized most, was slipping through his fingers. I walked in quietly, greeted a few people, and headed straight for my office. My father was already there, waiting. He looked older, a decade older overnight. The man who once commanded boardrooms with his voice now spoke like someone trying not to drown. "Why?" he asked softly. "Why did you have to do it that way?" I sat down, meeting his eyes.